Okay, so guys, in this video, I want to do a comparison between an FM3 Fractal modular pedal board and Positive Grid on as a plugin on Pro Tools. So let's turn the FM3 on. The FM3 takes just a few seconds to upload all the database of presets. As you can see, yes, so basically I have created a clean patch for FM3. I will get into the details in a bit concerning the amp that I chose and the cab and everything, and the signal chain, and we're gonna compare it to a similar preset that I've created on Positive Grid. Let's see. So here's my Pro Tools session. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open a BIAS FX2 session. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna select a similar preset that I have created on Positive Grid. So as you can see, the signal path here is made of Fender Bassman Emulation 1962 with a green 25C cab, a bit of EQ, and just a touch of reverb. As you can see from my Pro Tools session, I've done basically 3 tracks. One of the tracks doesn't have any plugin inserted because it's specifically done to get the stereo input from the Fractal Fm3. 2 of the other tracks are specifically created to lodge the BIAS FX2 and the BIAS amp. I will explain you in a bit why we also have the BIAS amp on a separate track. Basically, we're gonna use mainly the BIAS FX2. Okay, so let's focus on the Positive Grid BIAS FX2 first. First of all, I've chosen a very simple signal path, amp, cab, EQ, and reverb, because we want to compare the pure signal of a clean sound. And we want to compare it to an amp that is on FM3, the Fractal Fm3, that sounds really good, that is based on the Bassman Fm3 Emulation. So we're going to compare 2 amps that are theoretically quite similar. So Positive Grid, as you can see, and as a lot of other people have reviewed, as a quite cool visual appearance, showing you the cab, the head, and just like as if it was like a real amp. The thing is, and this is why I have anticipated that I have opened another track for the BIAS amp, is that on BIAS FX you can operate only the front panel controls, which is gain, bass, and the usual controls that you have on the front panel of an amp. In order to change the amp settings in terms of preamp, valves, controls, and bias and staging and everything, you need to actually operate through the BIAS amp, which is a bit tricky. On Fractal Fm3 you can do everything on the same page. Here, as far as I understood, basically you have to edit all the parameters of your amp on BIAS amp, which includes tube stages, distortion, frequencies and gains and everything, power amp, transformer. You have to do all this tweaking on the BIAS amp plugin, which is a different one. And as far as I understood, if you save everything here, then it's gonna affect the amp on the BIAS effects. On the BIAS effects, on the other hand, you can actually put the amp and edit all the signal chain, put in all the effects that you want. As I said again, all these things you can do it in in the FM3 edit in one place. And this is, on the other hand, what you see on the amp section of a preset on FM3 edit. So you don't have to go to a different plugin or a different section. By the way, this is the desktop software, and you can do all these functions in the actual pedal itself, right? So just choosing layout, you can do everything in here. But anyway, for this demonstration, it's easier to update and edit everything on the desktop software. On the FM3 edit, you have all the front panel amp settings, but also the preamp section that allows you to tweak all the power amp and preamp. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make sure that we're gonna have a similar setup in both preamp and power amp sections of both amps, on BIAS amp and on FM3. And then also we're gonna try to have a similar cab emulation, which we can do on the BIAS FX and on the FM3. Here we are choosing on positive grid, we are choosing a bass GK 4/10, which is a type of cab that goes quite well with the Fender Bassman, or we can also choose a Green 25, which is a 4/12. The layout is a little different, of course. Visually on the positive grid we have, for example, if we select the choice of Celestion speakers, we have quite a good selection. Also visually we can compare the Celestion Blue with the greenbacks and all the rest. On the FM3 we have now this 4/12 stock bass guy 57B and 4/12 bass guy 160 cabs, and we can browse through all the possible cabs via this function picker. So the selection is really big, and there's a lot to tweak and to check, browsing through an incredible amount of cab emulation possibility that comes from the IR technology. So clicking on manage, basically we can select everything. Another choice that we have on the positive grid is the option to move and select the mic that you want to use to mic your cab, from the SM57 to the MD421, R121 and C414, which is the usual Sennheiser. We can add another mic if we want. We can position and also having the open back. So in order to have like a similar cab selection, let's choose on a positive grid the G12M Greenback and we have a similar selection on the FM3, and we're gonna choose the Celestions for both sides, Cab 1L, Cab 2R. So in order to switch from the clean patch saved on the FM3 to the one on positive grid, I have created a specific bypass channel where, as you can see, we are simply going from in to out. This is especially done in order to route my signal from the guitar to Pro Tools totally unaffected and unamped. So I'm simply going through the FM3 and getting into the positive grid in order to have only the positive grid BIAS FX2 sound. So after this quick comparison, what can we deduct? So we can also see from the waveforms that the Fractal naturally gives off a bit more of a chunkier, bassier sound, while the positive grid is a bit brighter. I would say the thing is that is a bit tricky is to EQ both systems in the same way, because the problem is that on the positive grid the same EQing for bass, middle and treble doesn't really correspond to the same EQing on the Fractal, as well as the drive that should be corresponding to the gain stage of the Bassman on the positive grid. So the problem is that in order to achieve the same level of gain on the FM3, you would have to push the gain on the positive grid a little bit more. So they're not equally, I would say, adjustable. There are different adjustments to be done in order to get the same EQing. But on the whole, I would say the tone is quite similar. I would say there's a little bit more of a dynamic response to the playing on the FM3. But the positive grid on the whole is quite gives quite a clean and direct attack response. So I would say, aside from the EQing and the overall gain staging setup, feel free to add comments here. This comparison was done only for the standard clean sound. Of course, there's a ton of effects that you can add, reverbs, delays, but I wanted to keep it like stripped back. I mean, on a very dry natural clean sound with just a touch of reverb. Feel free to add comments, and I will do the same thing for an overdrive distorted sound. For a lead sound, we can check a lot of different options on both. Both Positive Grid and FM3 have a really good distortions and overdrive sounds.